There is a moment that arrives long after the final whistle, when the crowd has vanished, when the stadium lights flicker into a softer glow, and when the last echoes of celebration dissolve into the night. It is a moment of stillness that feels almost unnatural in a place built upon noise. I have walked through those empty stadium corridors many times, and each time I felt the same strange gravity. The silence carries a presence. It leaves space for truths that are never spoken aloud. It reminds me that the story of the NFL, the story of how it became the biggest show on earth, cannot be understood without first stepping into the quiet that follows the spectacle. The world sees the touchdowns, the cheers, the pageantry, the unstoppable march of fame and fortune. But the men who play the game know that their careers do not pivot in those moments. The turning points arrive in the aftermath, when the adrenaline settles and the body begins to speak in ways the cameras never record. The silence after the crowd fades is the setting where every player confronts a question they never asked when they were young. How much did the game take from me today, and how much more will it demand before I am no longer the version of myself I once was? Over the years, I began to understand something players rarely admit openly. Every athlete carries two careers. There is the career the public watches on Sundays, measured in statistics, highlights, awards, and legacy. And then there is the private career, the one marked by invisible shifts that only the athlete can feel. These shifts reveal what I came to call the final season. The final season is not the one officially listed on a resume. It is not the year a player announces retirement. It is the season in which a player realizes that he has crossed a threshold he cannot step back over. It is the moment when who he was before becomes a memory rather than an identity. Some players experience their final season suddenly. Others arrive there slowly, almost unwillingly, without noticing the incremental losses that shaped the change. But every story shares one common truth. There is always a moment when the old self begins to fade, even if the world applauds the new one. I once spoke to a linebacker who played with a level of ferocity that made him a legend in his city. He told me about a hit that changed everything. It happened early in a season when he was still young enough to be fearless, but old enough to understand the risks. He lowered his shoulder to stop a running back, felt the collision, and then felt something else. He said it was not pain, not fear, but an absence. A hollow sensation that lingered long after he stood back up. He played the rest of the game. He finished the season. He collected accolades and praise. But that collision became the dividing line in his life. In the silence after that game, he realized he could no longer find the person he had been before it. Another player, a talented receiver who had spent years perfecting his craft, once told me about the moment his confidence shifted. It was not caused by an injury or a mistake. It happened on an ordinary play. He ran a familiar route, made a cut he had made 1,000 times, and suddenly felt the weight of hesitation settle into his body. He reached for the ball, secured it, and continued downfield, but he knew he was no longer the same. The hesitation lived inside him from that moment forward. He finished the year with strong numbers, yet he said that play marked the beginning of his final season. Not the final day of his career, but the final day of the version of himself who never questioned his instincts. Stories like these do not appear in highlight reels. They do not become part of the celebratory narrative that surrounds the league. They are buried beneath the spectacle, hidden behind interviews filled with confidence and determination. But they form the emotional core of the sport. They reveal the depth of what the NFL demands from the men who carry it forward each week. The league did not begin as a cinematic empire. It began as a regional experiment. A rough and unpredictable gathering of teams struggling to survive in a world that barely noticed them. There was no grand marketing strategy. There were no billion-dollar contracts. There were no national broadcasts shaping the public imagination. The early players stepped onto the field with little expectation beyond the game itself. Yet even then, the silence after the crowd faded carried the same truth. The game took something from them. and they gave it willingly for reasons they often could not articulate. As the NFL evolved, the stakes grew higher. The crowds grew larger. The money grew unimaginable. The fame grew relentless. The spectacle expanded until it became unavoidable in American life. The quiet moments after the game grew heavier under the weight of everything the league had become. The silence that once belonged only to players now held the echoes of a national obsession. The NFL became a reflection of American ambition and American appetite. It became a symbol of unity and conflict. It became a story of heroes and consequences. Yet despite its transformation into an entertainment giant, the core of the sport remained anchored in the private battles players faced long after the cameras turned away. When I think about the league's rise, I think about the conversations players shared in those quiet corners where no reporters stood. The stories they told with softened voices. Stories about fear, resilience, sacrifice, and damaged identities. Stories about moments that altered everything. Stories that revealed how the final season was never about retirement, but about transformation. Some men found peace with that transformation. Others carried it with them like a shadow. All of them contributed to the sprawling narrative that turned the NFL into the cultural force it is today. Without those private sacrifices, the public spectacle would have been impossible. The league became the biggest show on earth because of a complex exchange between what the game offered and what it demanded in return. As I reflect on these truths, I am left with questions that continue to shape the way I see the sport. What is the real cost of building such an enormous entertainment empire? How did a regional pastime transform into a national identity? What did the league gain from its relentless pursuit of greatness, and what did it lose along the way? And perhaps most importantly, how many players stepped into their final season long before anyone realized it? These are the questions that guide the journey ahead. To understand the NFL is to travel through the silence where careers turned, identities shifted, and destinies changed. It is to recognize that the biggest show on earth was built not only on triumph, but on transformation. It is to understand that the heart of the sport beats just as loudly in the quiet as it does in the roar of the crowd. I've spent my life studying how the biggest institutions in American culture grew from fragile beginnings into towering. Forces that shaped what people watch, what they believe, and how they measure themselves. Yet nothing I have ever examined carries the same weight, the same mythology, or the same national gravity as the National Football League. To understand how the NFL built the biggest entertainment product in the United States, you have to return to an era when the league was anything but powerful. It was a world of crumbling stadiums, small crowds, limited funding, and owners who often operated on faith rather than financial certainty. The early decades were scattered and uneven, divided by rival leagues that rose quickly and collapsed just as fast. Teams folded overnight. Players worked second jobs. Stability was the exception. Risk was the rule. Even then, the seeds of something greater were being planted, shaped by men who believed that football could be more than a sport. They believed it could become a national language. Those early years were defined by survival. The league relied on local support that varied dramatically from city to city. Some markets embraced football almost immediately. Others treated it as a novelty. Rival leagues like the All-America Football Conference challenged the NFL and forced it to rethink its own structure. That tension eventually led to mergers that brought new teams, new talent, and new strategies into the fold. The instability of the early years created an environment where innovation mattered more than tradition. Owners had to take chances. Coaches had to adapt. Players had to endure conditions that modern athletes would hardly recognize. Out of that chaos emerged the foundation for something lasting. The league did not grow because it was perfect. It grew because it was determined. Then came the shift that changed the NFL forever. Television. When the first cameras pointed toward the field, many owners saw it as a distraction that would reduce ticket sales. What they did not realize was that the game, built on collisions and strategy, translated better to screens than any sport before it. The NFL understood that it had stumbled upon a force that could multiply its audience beyond anything stadiums could hold. That realization sparked decisions that would shape the next 70 years. The league partnered with networks willing to take risks, producing a broadcast product that felt different from traditional sports coverage. A child in Texas could idolize a quarterback from New York. Economic transformation followed. As broadcasting rights escalated, the league began negotiating contracts worth hundreds of millions and eventually billions. Each contract changed the scale of the business. Stadiums expanded. Franchises gained value at speeds unmatched in American sports. The financial foundation became stronger than any league in the world. Even in seasons marked by controversies or labor conflicts, the league maintained a firm hold on the national imagination. It adjusted rules to protect players and enhance scoring. It adapted to new technologies and new audiences. It experimented with marketing that framed football not only as a competition, but as a symbol of American resilience and ambition. This growth did not happen in a vacuum. Football became intertwined with the identity of the country. It offered a reflection of how Americans saw themselves: bold, competitive, strategic, willing to endure pain for the sake of purpose. The sport became a cultural mirror. Journalists wrote about its impact on masculinity, community, and national pride. Players spoke about the sacrifices required to survive a season. Executives described how the league positioned itself as both entertainment and ritual. Cities measured their prestige through the success of their teams. Behind this cultural influence were the forces that shaped the league in ways the public rarely saw. Marketing campaigns designed to create lifelong fans. Labor battles that pushed players to fight for their health, their salaries, and their futures. Rule changes introduced to protect the integrity of the game and ensure its longevity. Controversies that threatened trust only to be met with recalibration or reform. The NFL did not ascend through perfection. It ascended through relentless adaptation. Every setback became a lesson. Every decade brought a new reinvention. The league understood that survival required evolution. That evolution built the modern NFL. As I look at the journey ahead in this documentary, I know that the story of how the NFL built the biggest show on earth is not a simple timeline or a list of milestones. It is a combination of economics, culture, identity, and sacrifice. It is the story of a league that moved from regional obscurity to global dominance. I have always believed that true transformation rarely announces itself in the moment. It grows in quiet decisions, slow shifts, and turning points that feel ordinary before history elevates them into something else. When I look back at the mid-20th century, I see the period when the NFL stopped being a scattered regional pastime and began reshaping itself into the powerful institution it is today. The turning point began with survival. World War II left rosters depleted and franchises strained, but it also forced the league to adapt to new realities. Teams merged temporarily to stay afloat. Travel became difficult. Money grew tight. In that environment, the league learned to operate within limits. It also learned that it would need to evolve if it wanted to remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. Once the war ended, the economy surged and the nation entered a period of optimism. That optimism led to new forms of entertainment, new competition, and new expectations. The NFL had a choice. It could remain comfortable in its small, familiar world. Or it could reinvent itself for a country that was eager for something bigger and bolder. One of the first steps toward reinvention came through integration. The league had allowed black players in its earliest years, but quietly pushed them out by the mid-1930s. By the late 1940s, the pressure to re-examine that barrier grew stronger. Colleges were producing extraordinary black athletes. Journalists questioned the fairness of exclusion. Fans wondered why the sport did not reflect the diversity of the country. The breaking of baseball's color line accelerated the conversation. The NFL could no longer avoid the truth. Segregation held the league back. Reintegration began slowly, team by team, sometimes quietly and sometimes with resistance. Yet each new signing expanded the league's talent pool and opened the door for players whose skill, strength, and intelligence elevated the quality of the game. Expansion followed. New franchises brought new markets into the fold, creating rivalries and identities that helped strengthen the league's presence nationwide. Expansion did more than grow the league. It spread the culture of football across regions that had never embraced it at the professional level. Southern cities gained representation. Western states became hubs of football passion. At the same time, innovations behind the scenes quietly guided the league forward. The creation of the draft brought order to the chaos of player recruitment. It gave struggling teams a chance to rebuild and prevented wealthier franchises from hoarding talent. The salary structure changed. The schedule expanded. The league office grew more organized and more strategic. Decisions that once depended on instinct evolved into long-term planning. Coaches delivered speeches that sounded like reflections of the country's values. Players became symbols of perseverance. Entire cities measured their pride through the resilience of their teams. This alignment between the sport and national identity did not happen overnight. It grew through generations of athletes who carried themselves like storytellers of a distinctly American narrative. By the time the 1950s arrived, the league sensed that it stood on the threshold of something extraordinary. The country had television sets flickering in nearly every living room. Families gathered around them at night, eager for shared experiences that brought them closer. The NFL recognized that this was the moment to strike. The league built partnerships with networks that saw potential in the drama of football. Broadcasters showed replays. Announcers explained strategy. Cameras captured details fans had never noticed from stadium seats. The sport transitioned from an in-person experience to a national ritual. Owners invested in larger stadiums and broader marketing. The league kept expanding, both physically and imaginatively. It understood that the future would reward those who adapted. That understanding drove decisions that shaped decades of growth. What truly defined the birth of the modern NFL was the way the league balanced tradition with innovation. It honored the roots of the sport while searching for ways to build something larger than any fan from the early years could have imagined. It embraced the past while carving a new identity that reflected the changing country. The modern NFL emerged from a combination of bold leadership, cultural shifts, and the willingness to redefine its own boundaries. By the early 1960s, the league was no longer the fragmented organization it had once been. It had vision. It had structure. It had a growing national audience. It had the confidence to challenge other leagues for supremacy. The seeds of dominance were already planted. And although the greatest battles still lay ahead, the transformation was undeniable. The league had positioned itself to become a defining force in American entertainment, grounded in the decisions made during its most pivotal era. As I look back on that period, I see how each step, each conflict, each realization guided the league toward a future that would reshape not only sports, but American culture itself. The birth of the modern NFL was not one moment. It was a long, determined ascent built on reinvention, resolve, and an unwavering belief in what the sport could become. That belief set the stage for everything the league would achieve, and everything it would eventually confront as it became the biggest show on earth. I have always believed that some revolutions arrive without noise. They appear not with fireworks or dramatic declarations, but with a simple decision, a quiet agreement, or a meeting held in an unremarkable room. When I look at the rise of the NFL, I return again and again to the moment when television stopped being a novelty and became the force that would reshape the entire league. The transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded through vision, conflict, bargaining, and risk. At the center of it stood a commissioner who understood something no one else fully grasped at the time. Pete Rozelle saw the future before anyone knew they were looking at one. The league Rozelle inherited in 1960 was ambitious but fractured. Teams fought for attention. Markets competed against each other. Ratings were uneven. Television networks treated football as filler content rather than a national draw. Yet Rozelle recognized that television was not merely a tool for exposure. It was the new bloodstream of American entertainment. The country was changing. Suburbs were growing. Families gathered around glowing screens at night, searching for stories large enough to capture their imagination. Rozelle understood that the NFL could provide those stories. More importantly, he understood that television could unify a league that had been divided since its formation. The first milestone came when Rozelle convinced team owners to share broadcast revenue. At the time, the idea seemed radical. Wealthier teams did not want to divide their profits with smaller markets. Owners who relied on large regional audiences believed they deserved a greater reward. Rozelle argued that the only way to build a strong league was to ensure every team could compete financially. He framed revenue sharing not as charity but as strategy. If one team failed, the league failed with it. Eventually, the owners agreed, though not unanimously. That agreement changed everything. It aligned the clubs as partners rather than adversaries and positioned the NFL as a unified product rather than a collection of independent brands. Television networks noticed. For the first time, they saw a league that offered national consistency rather than scattered broadcasts. Viewers across the country could watch games that felt connected to a broader narrative. Rozelle capitalized on the momentum and negotiated a groundbreaking deal with CBS. The network paid a record sum for the rights to broadcast NFL games nationwide. Overnight, football became part of American weekends in a way it had never been before. What had once been a regional attraction suddenly reached millions of homes simultaneously. The shift was not merely numerical, it was cultural. Television introduced the country to players whose personalities and performances transcended geography. Fans in the Midwest watched stars from the East Coast. Children on the West Coast imitated heroes from the South. Games became shared experiences that connected families, neighborhoods, and cities. Football was no longer something people attended. It became something people lived with. The NFL learned that it was not just selling tickets. It was selling a narrative rooted in competition, drama, and identity. The impact grew even more profound when the American Football League entered the picture. The AFL understood the importance of television as deeply as Rozelle did. Their competition sparked a broadcasting arms race. Networks bid higher. Production values improved. Broadcasters experimented with slow-motion replays and creative camera angles. Viewers saw details they had never witnessed before. The intimacy of television exposed the emotion in players' faces, the intensity in coaches' eyes, and the strategic complexity beneath every play. Football transformed from a distant spectacle into an immersive experience. Rozelle recognized that television could turn the league into a story with chapters unfolding each week. He embraced the idea of scheduling games in ways that maximized national attention. Monday Night Football emerged from this philosophy. It became a ritual that blended sport, culture, and entertainment. The broadcasts delivered memorable performances and created moments that became part of American memory. Viewers grew used to planning their weeks around the NFL schedule. The sport shaped the rhythm of the country's routine. The league's relationship with television deepened as broadcasts evolved. Commentators studied film like coaches. Analysts broke down plays with precision. Networks invested in storytelling that framed games as battles of strategy and will. Fans learned to appreciate the sport on a deeper level. Football felt cinematic long before anyone used that word to describe it. Each broadcast became a production built on anticipation, drama, and resolution. The NFL realized that television did not simply show the game. It elevated it. Economic transformation followed. Rights deals expanded into sums that once seemed impossible. Teams gained resources to invest in facilities, development, and innovation. Players entered a world where their performance on the screen could secure them long-term recognition and financial stability. The league became one of the most powerful entertainment engines in the world. Stadiums grew. Audiences expanded. Advertisers competed for seconds of airtime during commercial breaks. The biggest shift came when the Super Bowl evolved into a national holiday. Early editions were promising, but not yet the spectacle they would become. Television changed that. The game reached viewers who had never watched football during the regular season. Musical performances, commercials, and halftime programming added layers of cultural significance. The event transcended sports. It became a yearly gathering that united the country through shared excitement and anticipation. The NFL discovered the power of merging sport with storytelling, celebration, and national symbolism. As television strengthened the league, it also introduced challenges. The spotlight exposed controversies, conflicts, and vulnerabilities. Fans saw injuries in real time. Debates surfaced regarding safety, officiating, and fairness. The league understood that visibility demanded accountability. It began navigating an era where every decision was scrutinized and every moment captured by millions of eyes. Television forced the NFL to evolve, confront issues more directly, and adapt to changing expectations. Despite those challenges, Rozelle continued to push forward. He negotiated deals that ensured every team remained financially stable. He expanded the league's media presence internationally. He positioned football at the heart of American culture. His leadership turned the NFL from a rising sport into a phenomenon that shaped identities and influenced society. Rozelle retired with a legacy rooted in vision, adaptability, and an understanding that the future belonged to those who recognized opportunity before it became obvious. Looking back, I see the profound truth that the NFL's rise was inseparable from the rise of television. The two institutions grew together, each shaping the other. Television gave football the national stage it needed. Football gave television the drama and structure it craved. The partnership created an entertainment force unmatched by any other sport in the country. The power that changed everything did not arrive through dramatic gestures. It grew from Rozelle's insistence on unity, fairness, and strategic vision. It grew from the network's willingness to innovate. It grew from fans who embraced football as a part of their identity. Through television, the NFL found its voice. It found its rhythm. It found the scale necessary to become what many now call the biggest show on earth. That transformation would shape the decades to follow and lay the groundwork for battles, breakthroughs, controversies, and reinventions that would test the league's resilience. Television built the platform. What the NFL did with that platform would define the rest of its story. I have always believed that nothing tests the strength of a growing institution like a worthy rival. Pressure reveals truth. Conflict exposes weaknesses. Competition forces evolution. It was a conflict born from dissatisfaction, ambition, and the belief that football could be bigger, more inclusive, and more exciting than the traditionalists allowed it to be. That belief sparked a decade of bidding wars, public battles, and innovations that transformed the sport. By the time the dust settled, the merger that emerged from the chaos did not simply unite two leagues. It created the giant that would become the most powerful sports organization in America. The story began with frustration. A group of wealthy businessmen wanted to buy NFL teams, but the league refused to expand quickly enough to meet their demands. A closed door created an opportunity. Instead of waiting for approval, they formed their own league. The AFL launched with bold intentions and a willingness to challenge every assumption that the NFL considered sacred. The newcomers did not want to imitate the NFL. They wanted to redefine professional football. Their uniforms were brighter. Their offensive schemes were more aggressive. Their games felt faster, looser, and more modern. They introduced ideas that would eventually become central to the future of the sport. In doing so, they caught the NFL off guard and forced it into a battle it never expected to fight. The AFL understood that visibility was everything, and television provided the perfect path forward. While the NFL maintained long-time partnerships, the AFL secured a groundbreaking national contract with ABC. The deal gave the league immediate exposure and enough financial support to compete for players. The networks appreciated the AFL's willingness to entertain. Games were filled with daring passing attacks, wide-open formations, and athletes who had been overlooked or undervalued by the NFL. The broadcasts presented a different style of football, one that appealed to younger fans and regions the NFL had not fully captured. Viewers across the country discovered a fresh brand of excitement that challenged the NFL's traditional dominance. The war between the leagues escalated most fiercely in their battle for talent. College football stars suddenly found themselves at the center of bidding contests. Contracts skyrocketed. Secret negotiations unfolded in hotel rooms and airport lounges. Some players signed agreements with both leagues without understanding the legal ramifications. One of the most famous moments came when the AFL's New York franchise signed quarterback Joe Namath, a charismatic star from Alabama whose talent and personality symbolized the league's bold identity. His contract shattered financial records and sent a message that the AFL was willing to outspend and outmaneuver the NFL for any player it wanted. The NFL responded aggressively. It expanded into southern and western cities the AFL hoped to claim. It increased salary offers. It sharpened its marketing strategy. Each league fought to establish itself as the superior product. The country became a battleground where fans argued over style, loyalty, and vision. The rivalry created a sense of urgency that pushed both leagues toward innovation. Coaches redesigned playbooks to keep up with the speed of the changing sport. Owners invested in stadium improvements. Broadcasters enhanced production techniques to elevate the viewing experience. The arms race did more than create competition. It created progress. Despite the tension, there was something undeniably compelling about the contrast between the two leagues. The NFL carried the weight of tradition. It represented stability, discipline, and legacy. The AFL embodied change. Its teams embraced creative identities. Their logos, uniforms, and color palettes felt modern. Their athletes spoke openly about the joy of playing in a league that valued individuality. Fans who had felt disconnected from the NFL's formality found themselves drawn to the energy of the AFL. The cultural divide mirrored the broader transformations of the 1960s. The country was changing, and football reflected that shift. As the battles intensified, it became clear that the competition could not continue indefinitely. Salaries were spiraling. Draft disputes created legal challenges. The leagues poured money into recruitment instead of long-term growth. Owners recognized the danger. They understood that the sport needed stability and unity. Quiet meetings began between representatives of both leagues. The discussions were secretive, cautious, and filled with complex negotiations. The goal was simple, but difficult to execute. Combine the two leagues into one structure without alienating fans or undermining the integrity of competition. The agreement did not erase the rivalry overnight. It required years of planning, adjustments, and strategic compromises. Players who had spent years battling for recognition discovered new opportunities to compete on the biggest stage. Innovations born in the AFL became core features of the modern NFL. the legacy of the AFL remained visible in many ways. The merger brought new energy into the NFL. It encouraged teams to embrace creativity. It expanded the talent pool. It accelerated the evolution of the sport. The combination of tradition and innovation created a product capable of capturing national interest at a level previously unimaginable. The Super Bowl quickly grew into a cultural phenomenon that symbolized the success of the unified league. Each year, it became more elaborate, more celebrated, and more influential. By the 1970s, the NFL had become the dominant force in American sports, driven by the momentum created during its fiercest rivalry. What stands out most from that era is how conflict forced growth. Without the NFL, the AFL may have struggled to establish long-term stability. Together, they created a league that combined structure with imagination. They built a system strong enough to withstand economic fluctuations, cultural shifts, and the pressures of national scrutiny. The merger did more than stabilize professional football. It prepared the league for decades of expansion, innovation, and dominance. Looking back, I see that the AFL War shaped the spirit of the modern NFL. It created a league defined by competition, ambition, and adaptability. I have always believed that the most powerful cultural events do not begin as monumental ideas. They begin as experiments. It was built through strategy, spectacle, and a deep understanding of how to turn sport into mythology. It was officially named the AFL-NFL World Championship Game, a title that felt technical, awkward, and uninspiring. The name lacked energy. It lacked identity, did not convey the scale that league leaders hoped the event would one day reach. Still, he understood branding. He understood the power of giving the country something larger than a game. The journey toward creating that symbol began with a simple shift, a name that unified imagination with ambition. The term Super Bowl emerged informally. According to multiple accounts, AFL founder Lamar Hunt used it casually in conversation, partly inspired by a children's toy called the Super Ball. The name was playful, but it carried something the official title did not. It felt memorable. It felt bold. It felt like the kind of event the country could attach itself to. The league eventually embraced the name because it captured the spirit of what the championship was meant to represent. Branding begins with memory, and nothing is remembered if it is not easily spoken. The early Super Bowls were experiments in presentation. The league did not yet have a blueprint for merging sports with national ritual. Stadiums were not always full. Halftime shows featured marching bands rather than elaborate productions. The broadcasts were split between networks that still held on to the habits of the rivalry years. Yet even in those early editions, the league recognized that the game held potential far beyond what appeared on the surface. It was the only event that brought together fans of both leagues. It was the single moment where the sport's identity reached across regional lines and merged into one national voice. That unity became the foundation of the brand. The turning point came in 1969 when the New York Jets, led by Joe Namath, delivered one of the most iconic upsets in sports history. Namath had guaranteed victory over the Baltimore Colts, a bold declaration that captivated the country. When the Jets fulfilled that promise, the underdog story transformed the championship into a narrative spectacle. Suddenly, the Super Bowl was not just a game. It was a stage where legends were born, reputations were rebuilt, and the unexpected became possible. The league recognized that drama was its most powerful ingredient. That realization shaped every branding decision that followed. As the years progressed, the NFL understood that the Super Bowl needed to feel different from any other game. It needed to stand on its own as an event defined by tradition, ceremony, and magnitude. The league began crafting a structure that emphasized anticipation. Media coverage expanded. Pre-game shows grew longer. Analysts debated storylines for weeks. Commercial slots became coveted spaces where advertisers competed to deliver moments as memorable as the game itself. The Super Bowl became a complete entertainment package, designed to attract audiences that extended far beyond dedicated football fans. Branding the event required more than promotion. It required identity. The NFL began using Roman numerals to distinguish each Super Bowl. The decision added a sense of gravitas. It gave the game an almost timeless quality, as though each edition were part of a continuing epic. The numerals emphasized continuity. They suggested that this was not just a sporting event, but a chapter in a larger story that stretched across generations. That choice solidified the Super Bowl's place in the cultural imagination. The league also understood the importance of location. Super Bowls were hosted in warm weather cities or indoor stadiums, ensuring consistently favorable conditions that allowed teams to perform at their highest level. This predictability contributed to the brand's reliability. The event became associated with ideal circumstances, vibrant host cities, and celebrations that lasted days. Fans traveled across the country not simply for the game, but for the experience surrounding it. Hotels filled. Restaurants flourished. Local economies soared. Cities began competing for the right to host the event, knowing the economic and cultural benefits that followed. As the NFL's media partnerships expanded, the presentation of the Super Bowl grew increasingly sophisticated. Networks introduced new camera angles, graphics, and storytelling techniques. The broadcasts became cinematic portrayals of athletic excellence. These productions helped shape the game's identity as a spectacle worthy of national attention. The league learned that the way the game was seen mattered as much as the game itself. Presentation became part of the brand. Every detail contributed to the event's mystique. By the 1980s, the league understood the power of deliberate storytelling. Super Bowl narratives often centered around dynasties, redemption arcs, or defining rivalries. Teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Dallas Cowboys became symbolic pillars of the event's mythology. Their repeated appearances helped build continuity, recognition, and drama. The Super Bowl became a stage where greatness was measured, validated, and remembered. The country learned to watch, not only for the game, but for the historical implications attached to every drive. As the event grew, the halftime show evolved into a cultural centerpiece. It transitioned from traditional entertainment to global performances by artists whose impact extended far beyond sports. The shift added another layer to the Super Bowl brand. It attracted audiences who cared more about music and culture than football. This dual appeal positioned the event as a gathering that united diverse communities under one enormous spotlight. The league understood that capturing multiple audiences meant expanding the definition of the event itself. Commercial advertising became its own form of spectacle. Companies recognized that Super Bowl airtime offered unparalleled exposure. They poured resources into creativity, humor, and emotional storytelling that turned commercials into miniature films. Viewers began anticipating the ads as much as the game. the NFL recognized the cultural shift and embraced the idea that the Super Bowl was not just about competition, but about collective entertainment. The ads became part of the narrative, shaping how people remembered each edition. Through every evolution, the league carefully protected its brand. It enforced strict control over the Super Bowl name, corporate partnerships, and trademark usage. This precision elevated the event's prestige. It maintained exclusivity. It ensured that the Super Bowl remained a singular moment in the national consciousness rather than a diluted concept. The NFL crafted an environment where every element, from ticket design to broadcast lighting, reinforced the magnitude of the experience. By the time the event entered the modern era, the Super Bowl had become more than a championship. It was the pinnacle of American entertainment. Over 100 million viewers tuned in annually. Families built traditions around the game. Schools and workplaces scheduled activities around it. Companies planned product launches. The Super Bowl became a cultural anchor, a moment when the country paused to witness the culmination of a season defined by strategy, sacrifice, and competition. What makes the Super Bowl distinct is the sense of finality it carries. The entire year leads to one game, one night, one moment that determines the champion. That finality gives the event a weight that other sports cannot replicate. It turns every decision into a potential legacy. Every play becomes a memory that may live for decades. Looking back on the evolution of the Super Bowl's brand, I see a rare combination of vision, timing, and innovation. The NFL understood that the event needed to be more than a title game. It needed to be an experience, a ritual, and a symbol of American identity. Through decades of refinement, the league crafted the most watched annual event in the country, a spectacle that blends athleticism, culture, entertainment, and national unity. The Super Bowl became the centerpiece of the NFL's rise, the defining image of a league that learned how to turn drama into tradition and competition into culture. It is the moment each season builds toward, and the moment the world watches with equal parts anticipation and awe. In creating the Super Bowl, the NFL did more than crown champions. It constructed a national ritual that reflects the ambition, imagination, and energy of the country itself. I have always believed that the most profound transformations in sports occur not on the field, but in the way the world perceives the players. Talent alone never creates icons. It is the combination of skill, narrative, visibility, and the willingness to bear immense public scrutiny that transforms a football player into a star. When I examine the history of the NFL, I see a slow but decisive shift from athletes who are largely anonymous professionals to figures who dominated headlines, commanded attention, and became embodiments of the sport itself. The rise of the star player was as essential to the NFL's ascent as television, mergers, or stadium expansion. Without it, the spectacle would lack the human center that fans attach themselves to. The narratives that anchor engagement, and the personalities that create lasting legends. In the league's early years, players were employees first, athletes second. They were often paid modest salaries, supplemented by off-season jobs. Newspapers reported scores, sometimes featured a standout game, but rarely lingered on individuals. Fans knew their favorite teams, sometimes knew hometown heroes, but rarely connected with the personal identities of those taking the field. The game was about collective achievement, about teamwork, about city pride. Personal branding was virtually non-existent. Yet even then, there were glimpses of what could be. A quarterback's flair, a running back's daring, or a receiver's athleticism could capture attention in a way that suggested the NFL's future potential for star power. Television accelerated this transformation. The cameras did not merely record games. They allowed viewers to see facial expressions, body language, and skill up close. Replays highlighted individual brilliance. Color commentary praised talent and dramatized rivalries. Suddenly, the country could witness the nuance of a perfect throw, the grace of a running cut, or the precision of a defensive play. The medium elevated the athlete from a name on a roster to a personality with presence and impact. Fans began forming emotional connections with the individuals on the field. They cheered their victories and lamented their failures in a way that went beyond team loyalty. Television turned performance into narrative, and narrative transformed performance into stardom. The AFL-NFL rivalry intensified this trend. Teams competed not only for championships, but for marketable personalities. Contracts became negotiations over visibility as much as skill. Charismatic players attracted attention and defined league identity. Joe Namath epitomized this shift. He was more than a quarterback. He was a symbol of confidence, style, and audacity. His guarantee of victory in Super Bowl III created a story that would outlive the game itself. The narrative around Namath exemplified how star power could enhance the league's brand. Fans did not merely watch him play. They watched his life, his attitude, and his performance converge in a single cultural moment. Namath's emergence demonstrated that the athlete could become a cornerstone of the NFL's marketing, media strategy, and cultural significance. The rise of the athlete as a star also demanded adaptation from the players themselves. They became public figures overnight, responsible for appearances, interviews, and the scrutiny of journalists and fans. Every decision, every statement, carried weight. They were expected to maintain performance on the field while simultaneously embodying ideals off it. The pressure was immense. Mistakes were magnified. Triumphs were amplified. Athletes had to navigate fame while preserving the competitive edge that initially earned them recognition. That dual expectation became a defining characteristic of professional football. Marketing strategies emerged around this new reality. Sports magazines, trading cards, television interviews, and merchandise all centered on individual players. Teams recognized that stars could sell tickets, boost ratings, and strengthen regional loyalty. Sponsors realized that endorsements with players could extend influence far beyond stadiums. The athlete became both a performer and a product, a living intersection of sport, culture, and commerce. This dynamic reshaped the economics of the league. Compensation began to reflect not just talent, but marketability. Athletes gained leverage, influence, and, in some cases, celebrity power that transcended the game. The transformation also brought a new type of intimacy between fans and athletes. Viewers followed personal narratives as closely as games. Stories of triumph over adversity, recovery from injuries, and battles with personal demons became part of the broader spectacle. Fans identified with the human element. Heroes were no longer only defined by their stats. They were defined by their decisions, their personalities, and the narratives constructed around them. The league recognized this human appeal as essential to building lasting engagement and cultural relevance. Yet the rise of the star athlete came with profound consequences. The increased visibility brought expectations that were often impossible to meet. Media scrutiny intensified. Private lives became public property. Every failure risked criticism, and every triumph created pressure to maintain standards. The emotional and psychological burden of celebrity became as consequential as the physical demands of the game. Players carried the weight of public attention in addition to the rigorous demands of professional football. The NFL's success, in part, depended on the endurance of its stars. Their ability to navigate fame while performing under extreme pressure. Integration further expanded the league's pool of potential stars. The inclusion of black athletes transformed the narrative landscape. Players such as Jim Brown, Gale Sayers, and later Walter Payton demonstrated skill and charisma that could captivate national audiences. Their success challenged prevailing cultural norms and reshaped what it meant to be a hero on and off the field. These athletes were not merely exceptional performers. They became symbols of social change, resilience, and progress, further intertwining the sport with national identity. The rise of diverse stars helped the NFL reach new audiences and reflect a country in transition. The media's focus on athletes as individuals also contributed to the emergence of fantasy narratives around football. Fans could imagine hypothetical matchups between stars from different teams or eras. Analysts dissected individual performance in ways that emphasized skill and strategy over raw statistics alone. The player's narrative became central to the sport's storytelling. It created an emotional resonance that amplified engagement, loyalty, and investment. Star athletes became the lens through which the country experienced football, the human connection that gave the game depth beyond the scoreboard. By the late 20th century, the player's identity had become inseparable from the league's brand. Each season featured emerging stars who would define the decade. Fans followed careers from draft day to retirement. Achievements were celebrated, mistakes scrutinized, and personalities elevated to cultural icons. The NFL had successfully transformed its athletes into narratives that could inspire, entertain, and captivate on a scale unmatched by any other American sport. The rise of the star athlete was not accidental. It was deliberate, rooted in television, media strategy, and cultural understanding. Looking back, I see that the evolution of the NFL's athletes into stars represents more than fame. It symbolizes the intersection of talent, visibility, and cultural relevance. It reflects the league's ability to identify human stories that resonate across generations. The rise of the athlete as a star was fundamental to the NFL's transformation from a competitive league into the largest entertainment enterprise in the country. It is through these individual narratives that the game gained soul, depth, and permanence. Stars became the conduits through which millions experienced the triumph, risk, and drama of professional football. The athlete became a star because the league, the media, and the fans converged to elevate skill into legend, performance into story, and players into icons. That transformation shaped the culture, economics, and mythology of the NFL, and set the stage for the era of celebrity, commercial influence, and national recognition that defines modern football. The star athlete became more than a player. He became a symbol of the NFL's reach, power, and enduring fascination. I have always believed that the true architecture of power is often invisible. It exists not in the cheers of the crowd or the spectacle on the field, but in the mechanisms that allow an institution to endure, grow, and dominate. The league that began as a regional collection of teams evolved into a global empire through calculated strategies that transformed every element of football into both product and spectacle. Television had given the league a national stage, but it was the economics behind the game, the monetization of attention, the cultivation of narratives, and the orchestration of consumer engagement that built the NFL into the juggernaut it is today. These investments reinforced the perception of legitimacy, professionalism, and excellence, further attracting audiences and sponsorships. Money became both a means and a signal of credibility. The NFL's approach to marketing extended to labor and social issues as well. The league recognized the importance of cultivating a positive image while negotiating disputes with players, unions, labor organizations, and public perception. Promoting star athletes and the excitement of the game balanced the visibility of controversy. The league's financial and marketing strategies demonstrate the depth of planning required to maintain dominance in a competitive, attention-driven society. Through these mechanisms, the NFL transformed games into events, athletes into icons, and football into the centerpiece of American culture. I have always believed that the most compelling stories in sports lie in the space between triumph and sacrifice. The stadium roars, the cameras roll, and the lights illuminate moments of glory. Yet beneath the spectacle, beyond the cheers, lies a world of quiet suffering that few fully acknowledge. In the NFL, the cost of performance extends far beyond the field. It is physical, relentless, and cumulative. It is psychological, invisible, and persistent. The league's rise as the most watched and most profitable sporting institution in America was built on the shoulders of athletes who paid a price most fans never see. And in examining that toll, we uncover a reality that challenges the myths of invincibility and heroism. From the moment a player steps onto the field, risk is inherent. Football is not a game of gentle collisions. It is a sport designed around force, speed, and precision. Hits that can topple an opponent are celebrated as displays of power. Yet every tackle, every sack, and every defensive charge leaves traces that accumulate over a career. Concussions were once shrugged off as minor inconveniences, part of the game's toughness. Players were expected to shake it off or walk it off. Pain was normalized. Injuries that might end careers today were previously treated with aspirin, ice, and the expectation of continued play. The very culture of resilience in football became a mechanism that obscured the physical cost of the sport. The data, when finally scrutinized, reveals the scale of the problem. Studies have shown that former NFL players face dramatically increased risks of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, joint degeneration, and early-onset dementia. These conditions are not abstract statistics. They are the lived realities of men who once commanded stadiums, carried franchises, and embodied the dreams of millions. Many struggle with memory loss, depression, and cognitive decline. Their lives after football are shaped not just by what they accomplished, but by what the game extracted from their bodies and minds. The narrative of heroism is inseparable from the narrative of sacrifice. And in the NFL, that sacrifice is often lifelong. Psychological strain is equally pervasive. Professional football is an ecosystem of constant evaluation, public scrutiny, and performance pressure. Every play is recorded, dissected, and judged. Media narratives construct images of players as heroes or villains. Contract negotiations add financial uncertainty. Injuries, trades, and team politics impose stress. Players navigate fame while simultaneously bearing the burden of expectation, personal, organizational, and societal. The mental demands are relentless. Anxiety, depression, and identity crises are common. Yet historically, these challenges were stigmatized or dismissed. The culture demanded stoicism, creating a paradox where psychological resilience was expected, but rarely supported. The toll extends into personal relationships. Players often spend extended periods away from family, traveling and training under intense schedules. Injuries can lead to isolation as rehabilitation requires solitude and discipline. The emotional strain of balancing public attention with private life adds a further layer of complexity. Many former athletes report difficulty adjusting to life after football, struggling to reconcile identities built around performance with a reality that no longer revolves around the game. Retirement can feel abrupt, disorienting, and disempowering, magnifying the hidden costs incurred during a career. Some of the most vivid examples come from players whose careers ended prematurely due to injury. These men entered the league at their physical peak, celebrated for talent and potential, yet found themselves navigating life with permanent limitations. Knee injuries, spinal trauma, and repeated concussions curtailed careers and left long-term consequences. Even for players who avoided catastrophic injury, the repetitive microtrauma of years on the field can create chronic pain and mobility issues. Football's spectacle relies on these bodies performing at maximum capacity. Yet the league has historically managed this cost with minimal acknowledgement, framing pain as part of the hero narrative. The culture of toughness amplified these consequences. Coaches, teammates, and even family members often reinforced the idea that playing through pain was necessary. Athletes internalized this philosophy. They celebrated endurance and vilified weakness, even when the consequences were severe. Concussions were hidden, injuries were downplayed, and players returned to action before full recovery. The very ethic that defined professionalism in the NFL created the conditions for long-term harm. Sacrifice became synonymous with duty, and the cost was often invisible to the public, measured only in cumulative damage years later. Media portrayal complicates the narrative further. Coverage glorifies resilience and performance while rarely contextualizing the personal cost. Highlight reels immortalize explosive plays, spectacular catches, and game-changing tackles. What is missing from the celebration is the strain behind the highlight the hours of rehabilitation. The pain of a body repeatedly battered, and the mental effort required to sustain excellence. Fans often admire the spectacle without realizing the sacrifices embedded in every movement. The mythology of invincibility masks the reality of vulnerability. Medical research and advocacy have begun to shift this narrative. Studies linking repetitive head trauma to cognitive decline forced the league to reconsider safety protocols, equipment standards, and return-to-play policies. Concussion protocols, enhanced helmets, and independent medical evaluations have emerged as responses to decades of systemic neglect. Yet, even these reforms highlight a difficult tension. The spectacle of the game relies on physical risk, yet those risks cannot be ignored indefinitely. The league's very business model depends on athletes performing at the limits of human endurance, while society increasingly demands accountability for player welfare. Personal testimonies illuminate the human side of the hidden toll. Former players recount struggles with memory, mood swings, and chronic pain. Many speak of a sense of betrayal, as the systems that elevated them also exposed them to lifelong consequences. Families bear the emotional weight, supporting loved ones through decline, frustration, and emotional instability. These narratives provide an essential counterbalance to the public image of invulnerability and heroism, reminding us that every statistic represents a lived, often painful, reality. Labor disputes and negotiations underscore this cost further. Players have fought for fair compensation, health benefits, and long-term care, recognizing that the league's profits often far exceeded what they received for the personal risks undertaken. Collective bargaining agreements evolved to provide pensions, disability benefits, and post-career support. These negotiations reflect an acknowledgement, albeit delayed, that the human cost of football requires structural redress. Even with these reforms, the tension remains between performance demands and the imperative to protect those who make the spectacle possible. The psychological toll also manifests in identity struggles. Many players enter the league young, defining themselves by athletic ability. When their careers end, they confront the sudden loss of identity, purpose, and community. The adulation, attention, and structure that define their lives disappear, leaving a void filled with physical discomfort and emotional complexity. Some turn to entrepreneurship, broadcasting, or coaching, but many face years of adjustment. The hidden toll is not merely physical, it is existential, reshaping lives and relationships in profound ways. Looking back, the story of the NFL's rise is inseparable from the sacrifices of its players. The spectacle, revenue, and cultural impact of the league are built on bodies that endure pain, minds that endure stress, and identities that endure transformation. For every celebrated star, countless others have borne the hidden costs of injury, pressure, and fame. Understanding this reality deepens our comprehension of the league's achievements and complicates the mythology of invincibility that surrounds it. The hidden toll on players is the silent shadow of the NFL's dazzling spectacle necessary, though often unacknowledged, part of its ascent. The NFL's success and the players' sacrifices are intertwined. The grandeur of the league, the cultural dominance, and the financial empire could not exist without the men who step onto the field, knowing the risks and paying them daily. These costs, largely invisible to the casual observer, are essential to understanding the full story of professional football. Recognition of this toll adds nuance, humanity, and moral weight to a history otherwise told in victories, statistics, and spectacle. The hidden toll on players is a reminder that every triumph carries consequence. Every cheer has its shadow. And every spectacle of power, speed, and precision is underpinned by the human cost borne by those who make it possible. Understanding this truth is central to comprehending the NFL, not merely as a league or business, but as a living, breathing ecosystem of human ambition, risk, and resilience. I have always believed that beneath the pageantry, beneath the roar of the crowd and the flash of cameras, professional football has always been a negotiation of power. The league may celebrate teamwork, athleticism, and spectacle, but behind the scenes, 'tis a battlefield of leverage, contracts, and labor rights. The story of labor in the NFL is the story of men asserting agency in a system designed to demand compliance. It is the story of strikes, negotiations, and legal battles that shaped the modern game. Understanding these struggles is essential to understanding how the NFL evolved from a collection of regional teams into the most powerful sports empire in history. In the early decades, players had almost no control over their careers. Contracts were brief, team-controlled, and heavily restrictive. The reserve clause allowed teams to retain rights over players indefinitely, limiting mobility and suppressing bargaining power. Salaries were modest, often requiring athletes to work additional jobs during the off-season. The contrast between the revenue generated by the league and the compensation provided to players was stark. Players performed at the highest levels, risking their bodies, yet the economic rewards often failed to reflect the risks undertaken. This imbalance planted the seeds for conflict. The first significant labor confrontation occurred in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Players began organizing to demand better wages, benefits, and working conditions. These confrontations were as much about dignity and respect as they were about financial compensation. Players sought the ability to control their careers, to choose teams based on opportunity rather than ownership mandates. Owners resisted, fearing the disruption of financial and competitive stability. Negotiations were tense, often involving court battles, public statements, and media manipulation. The struggle for free agency was not merely a business dispute. It was a fundamental assertion of professional autonomy. Players challenged a system designed to limit their freedom, setting precedents that would reshape the labor landscape of American sports. The strikes of the 1980s and early 1990s were defining moments. The 1982 strike, which reduced the season from 16 games to 9, demonstrated the players' collective power. Television contracts, fan loyalty, and public opinion were leveraged in high-stakes negotiation. The league faced pressure to reach a settlement while protecting its brand and financial interests. Similarly, the 1987 strike, accompanied by the controversial use of replacement players, exposed the vulnerabilities and strengths of both sides. These confrontations were more than disputes over dollars. They revealed the dynamics of power, the tension between labor and management, and the capacity of the NFL's economic machinery to absorb disruption. Television revenue played a dual role in these battles. On one hand, it created immense wealth that could be shared through negotiation. On the other hand, it amplified the stakes. Millions of viewers watched the games, creating public pressure on both players and owners. The league understood the leverage of broadcast exposure. Players recognized it as well. Every strike, negotiation, and legal maneuver unfolded not in isolation, but on a national stage, blending sport, commerce, and public perception into a high-stakes game of strategy. The evolution of contracts during this period highlights the intersection of labor, power, and economic strategy. Multi-year deals, signing bonuses, guaranteed salaries, and incentive structures became tools for negotiation. Players began to understand not only their on-field value, but their market value as commodities in an expanding entertainment ecosystem. Agents became essential intermediaries, translating athletic talent into financial and career security. Negotiation became a sophisticated, high-stakes enterprise, demanding intelligence, foresight, and persistence. These battles were not without cost. Strikes disrupted seasons, tested public loyalty, and generated tension between players and fans. Athletes faced criticism for prioritizing financial gain over the spectacle of the sport. Owners faced criticism for resisting change and exploiting labor. The tension between public perception and private negotiation created a continuous undercurrent of conflict. Yet these struggles were necessary to establish the structures that now define professional football. Without the battles of the past, modern salaries, health benefits, and free agency rules would not exist. Collective bargaining agreements formalized new realities. They codified benefits, established pension plans, provided long-term care for injured players, and delineated terms for salary arbitration. These agreements represent the hard-won victories of labor struggle, balancing the needs of players with the financial imperatives of the league. They also institutionalized mechanisms for ongoing negotiation, ensuring that labor and management would remain in dialogue even as the league grew into a cultural and financial powerhouse. Player empowerment did more than increase compensation. It reshaped culture. Stars could negotiate their own terms, influence marketing opportunities, and command attention beyond the field. This power dynamic changed the relationship between athletes and franchises, making them stakeholders rather than mere employees. The league's growth into a media empire was inseparable from the ability of its stars to assert influence and protect their interests. Labor struggles were thus not only battles for fairness, they were foundational to the creation of the modern NFL brand. The historical arc of labor in the NFL also intersects with the hidden toll on players. Negotiations over health benefits, injury compensation, and post-career care were informed by growing awareness of the physical and psychological costs of the game. The league's economic success amplified both the moral and legal imperatives to address these concerns. Strikes and legal actions were, in many ways, extensions of the struggle to ensure that players were not only compensated for talent, but protected from lifelong harm. International comparisons further illuminate the league's labor strategy. Unlike European soccer or other professional leagues, the NFL's revenue sharing, collective bargaining, and player protections represent a unique approach to labor relations. The balance achieved through negotiation shaped a competitive, profitable, and culturally dominant league while providing mechanisms to mediate conflict. The lessons of these struggles resonate beyond football, influencing labor relations in professional sports worldwide. Looking back, the narrative of labor battles in the NFL reveals a complex interplay of power, leverage, and strategy. The league's dominance is inseparable from the negotiations that defined rights, compensation, and control. Strikes, contracts, and free agency were not mere disruptions. They were necessary recalibrations of a system that demanded fairness amid escalating revenue and visibility. The victories, losses, and compromises of these labor struggles ensured that the league could grow sustainably while addressing, however imperfectly, the rights and needs of the men who make the spectacle possible. Labor in the NFL is not a footnote. It is central to the league's story. The battles fought over contracts, strikes, and rights shaped both the culture and the economy of the sport. Understanding these struggles is critical to understanding how the NFL became an empire, and why the men on the field are both participants and negotiators in a story far larger than the game itself. The NFL's labor battles demonstrate that power is never static. It is contested, negotiated, and enforced. Every contract, strike, and legal maneuver represents a chapter in the ongoing story of who controls the sport, who benefits, and who bears the cost. These confrontations are part of the foundation upon which the modern league stands, ensuring that the spectacle of football is supported by structures of both opportunity and accountability. I've always believed that the evolution of a sport is as much about its rules as it is about its players. In the NFL, the game on the field is a living organism, constantly adapting to new realities, pressures, and ambitions. Rule changes are not just technical adjustments. They are reflections of the league's priority: safety, competitiveness, entertainment, and revenue. To understand the modern NFL, we must examine the deliberate transformations that reshaped the sport, amplified spectacle, and redefined what it means to play professional football at the highest level. In the early decades, football was brutal by design. The rules encouraged physical dominance, and the line between strategy and sheer force was often blurred. Players were punished for mistakes with both injuries and criticism. The forward pass, while legalized in the early 20th century, was initially underutilized as the game's emphasis remained on ground and pound tactics. Teams dominated through strength, endurance, and toughness. The spectacle of the game relied on its raw, physical energy. Yet this approach also limited scoring, slowed the pace, and exposed athletes to extreme injury risk. The NFL recognized that to sustain national interest, it needed to evolve. One of the first areas of focus was safety. Repeated injuries, especially concussions and spinal trauma, posed a threat not only to players' careers, but to the league's legitimacy. Television ratings, merchandise sales, and ticket demand depended on a game that was simultaneously thrilling and sustainable. The NFL's architects understood that minor technical adjustments could have outsized effects on fan experience, player welfare, and revenue streams. Defensive schemes, once dominant, were constrained to enhance offensive freedom. Contact beyond 5 yards of the line of scrimmage was limited. Defensive holding was penalized, and pass interference rules evolved. Quarterbacks became more central to narratives. Receivers emerged as stars, and defenses had to adapt creatively. Each rule change rippled across the field, affecting strategies, player development, and the very identity of franchises. Games that dragged risked disengaging audiences. Unpredictable outcomes enhanced suspense. Adjustments to timing and scoring procedures reflected the league's goal of maximizing both fairness and entertainment. These changes were often subtle, yet impactful, shaping how fans experienced games, how coaches strategized, and how television networks packaged broadcasts. Every second on the field was now calibrated for impact, narrative, and audience retention. Perhaps most significantly, rule changes allowed the NFL to respond to external pressures and cultural shifts. Public concern over player safety, media scrutiny, and legal challenges demanded proactive management. Running backs, once central, saw their roles evolve or diminish. Defensive linemen and linebackers adapted to protect coverage gaps. Coaching strategies shifted, scouting priorities changed, and draft philosophies were recalibrated. The league's technical architecture shaped the economic and personal trajectories of those who played within it, linking governance directly to human and financial consequences. Cumulatively, these adjustments transformed the NFL from a purely physical contest into a sophisticated blend of athleticism, strategy, and entertainment. The sport became more dynamic, safer, and more viewer-friendly, without entirely sacrificing its intensity. Teams innovated, players adapted, and fans were rewarded with a game that retained its brutality while offering structured spectacle. The evolution of rules was not merely bureaucratic. It was central to the league's ability to dominate television, attract revenue, and sustain cultural relevance. Players, coaches, and fans have all internalized these rules, creating expectations that shape both experience and perception. Safety, offense, timing, and enforcement were not addressed reactively. They were managed as components of a larger vision. Each alteration reinforced the league's dual commitment to preserving physical spectacle and expanding cultural and economic influence. The rules themselves became instruments of empire building, structuring the game to maximize engagement, protect investment, and ensure longevity. The NFL's reinvention through rule changes demonstrates the league's ability to adapt without losing identity. In the end, the modern NFL is a product of both talent and governance. The spectacle we witness every Sunday, the narratives we follow, and the heroes we admire exist within a carefully constructed framework. The league's ability to reinvent itself through rules ensures that football remains thrilling, sustainable, and culturally central. The hidden calculations behind each change reveal a league attuned to both performance and perception, capable of evolving while preserving the essence of the sport. I have always believed that architecture is a reflection of ambition, and in the NFL, stadiums are the clearest expression of the league's rise from regional pastime to national spectacle. They are more than venues. They are cathedrals dedicated to performance, commerce, and cultural identity. The evolution of NFL stadiums mirrors the league's transformation, moving from modest, multi-purpose fields to billion-dollar arenas designed to capture attention, control experience, and generate revenue. These structures are monuments to ambition, where every seat, sight line, and amenity is calibrated for both spectacle and profit. In the early decades, NFL stadiums were utilitarian. Teams played in local fields, college stadiums, or municipal venues built for other purposes. Fans arrived on buses, cars, or streetcars, standing or sitting on wooden bleachers to watch games that were modest by today's standards. The emphasis was on proximity to the action rather than luxury or immersion. Attendance was regional, and revenue was largely ticket-driven. The league's early success depended on community loyalty, local sponsorships, and the occasional media broadcast. but the physical infrastructure reflected both constraint and aspiration. The shift began with the post-war boom, when teams recognized that stadiums could serve as both revenue engines and cultural symbols. Municipal investment, corporate sponsorship, and franchise ambition converged to fund projects that were larger, more sophisticated, and technologically advanced. These spaces transformed stadiums from communal arenas into multi-tiered economic machines. Corporations, VIPs, and high-net-worth individuals could pay for exclusive access, often at tens or hundreds of thousands per season. Revenue per square foot exploded, enabling teams to finance construction and operations while creating an aura of exclusivity. At the same time, general seating remained accessible to maintain the league's broad fan base. This stratified approach demonstrated the NFL's skill in monetizing attention, balancing accessibility with premium consumption, and integrating architectural design with financial strategy. Modern stadiums incorporate a technology-first mindset. Scoreboards, video screens, sound systems, and connectivity are designed to enhance experience while creating branding opportunities. Stadiums are no longer just places to watch football. They are immersive ecosystems where commerce, entertainment, and culture intersect. Fans experience scale, spectacle, and identity, reinforcing emotional connection to teams and cities. They are designed not only for comfort, but for awe, capturing imagination and anchoring the league's cultural authority. The economic implications of stadium construction are enormous. Teams, municipalities, and private investors spend billions on new venues, often leveraging public funds to secure private returns. Naming rights, sponsorships, and premium seating create recurring revenue streams. The NFL benefits directly from the visibility of these structures, while franchises gain long-term stability and branding advantages. Stadiums are not neutral spaces. They are financial instruments carefully engineered to sustain competitive advantage and market dominance. Labor, logistics, and design considerations further illustrate the sophistication behind modern stadiums. Each venue requires coordination of construction, security, concessions, and technology. Demanding expertise from multiple industries, stadiums operate year-round, hosting concerts, events, and corporate functions, further diversifying revenue. The scale of these operations reflects a level of industrial and cultural ambition unparalleled in American sports history. NFL stadiums are not just football fields. They are centers of commerce, culture, and social engineering. Fan experience has become a central design criterion. Sightlines, acoustics, seating comfort, and amenities are engineered to keep spectators engaged, both emotionally and physically. Concession options, social spaces, and fan zones enhance the overall experience while embedding revenue opportunities. The stadium becomes a place where identity, loyalty, and spectacle converge, allowing the league to cultivate both devotion and profit. Fans are not passive observers. They are active participants in an orchestrated environment designed to maximize engagement and emotional investment. Stadiums also play a role in shaping narratives about the NFL itself. Monumental venues convey stability, legitimacy, and cultural relevance. New stadiums signal ambition and growth, while renovations of historic sites honor tradition and legacy. The league's emphasis on infrastructure mirrors its broader strategy, combines spectacle, economics, and culture to dominate attention and define identity. Each brick, seat, and scoreboard is part of a larger story about power, ambition, and vision. The international dimension cannot be ignored. As the NFL expands into global markets, stadiums become showcases of American cultural dominance. Preseason games in London or Mexico City rely on temporary or adapted stadiums to project scale and legitimacy. The architecture of the sport becomes part of the narrative, signaling the NFL's ambition to transcend borders, extend influence, and monetize global attention. Stadiums are therefore both domestic cathedrals and international symbols, blending commerce, spectacle, and national identity into a tangible structure. Looking back, the evolution of stadiums reflects the NFL's ability to align infrastructure with vision. From wooden bleachers to billion-dollar venues, the league has systematically transformed where football is played to enhance economic, cultural, and emotional impact. Stadiums are more than buildings. They're statements of power, ambition, and identity. They are the physical manifestation of a league that understands that spectacle begins not only on the field, but in the environment that frames it. The NFL stadiums are, in every sense, cathedrals of the modern era. They embody the intersection of architecture, commerce, and culture. They enshrine performance, amplify spectacle, and sustain the financial and emotional engines of the league. They remind us that professional football is not just a game, it is an experience meticulously engineered from the ground up. In these spaces, ambition, design, and spectacle converge, creating environments where the league, its players, and its fans participate in a ritual of entertainment, identity, and power. To understand the NFL's rise as America's most powerful sports institution, one must examine how quarterbacks acquired their halo. While star quarterbacks existed, their fame was largely local, confined to the cities they represented and the regional radio broadcasts that carried their games. National attention was rare, and celebrity status was a byproduct of success rather than a structural feature of the league. In effect, quarterbacks became narrators of the game, shaping both outcomes on the field and perceptions off it. He understood that broadcasting could amplify the personalities of the sport, and quarterbacks were the ideal conduit. The public and media expect composure under scrutiny, resilience in adversity, and leadership both on and off the field. The weight of this role shapes careers, personal lives, and legacy. Injuries, poor performance, or off-field controversies can erode status, demonstrating that the halo is as fragile as it is powerful. The quarterback's prominence also affects league economics. Star QBs drive ticket sales, merchandise revenue, television ratings, and sponsorship deals. Franchises rely on these figures to sustain both profitability and cultural relevance. The financial stakes are immense, and the league structures, schedules, media coverage, and marketing strategies to maximize the exposure of these athletes. In effect, quarterbacks are both athletic and economic linchpins, embodying the intersection of talent, visibility, and revenue generation. This halo also shapes the pathways of young athletes. Quarterbacks in youth leagues, high school programs, and collegiate systems receive disproportionate attention, resources, and coaching. Scouting prioritizes attributes associated with success in the NFL's passing-focused offenses. In reflecting on the quarterback's place in the NFL, it becomes clear that their prominence is neither accidental nor solely a function of talent. It is the product of strategic vision, media amplification, cultural resonance, and economic incentive. The league's rise to national prominence, its cultural dominance, and its commercial empire are intertwined with the elevation of this singular role. The quarterback is the lens through which the story of professional football is told. The figure through whom narratives of glory, struggle, and spectacle are made tangible. Every game, every highlight, every broadcast reinforces this halo. Quarterbacks embody the stakes, drama, and artistry of professional football. They are both participants and symbols, executing plays while representing broader narratives about competition, leadership, and cultural values. Understanding the NFL's history, its economic ascent, and its cultural impact requires recognizing how the league constructed and sustained this spotlight, and how quarterbacks became the center around which everything else revolved. The halo around the quarterback is not merely a reflection of individual brilliance, it is a structural and cultural phenomenon. It illustrates the league's ability to create heroes, shape narratives, and monetize visibility. It reflects a careful orchestration of performance, media, and commerce, all designed to elevate both the player and the spectacle. In the modern NFL, few positions carry more responsibility, influence, or risk. The quarterback's journey, struggles, and triumphs reveal both the rewards and the pressures embedded in the league's pursuit of dominance. I have always believed that the NFL's public image is as carefully constructed as its on-field spectacle. For a league that thrives on visibility, attention, and cultural influence, controversies present existential threats. Yet the NFL has demonstrated a remarkable capacity to absorb scandal, manage crises, and maintain dominance. The league's approach to reputational risk is both deliberate and sophisticated, reflecting an organization that understands the fragility of perception and the necessity of narrative control. Scandals in the NFL are rarely just stories about individual misconduct. They are tests of institutional power, public loyalty, and strategic communication. From its earliest days, the NFL has faced moments that could have derailed growth. Gambling scandals, rule violations, and player misconduct have periodically threatened credibility. In the 1940s and 1950s, suspicions of game fixing and inconsistent enforcement of rules raised questions about integrity. The league responded not only through punishment, but by creating systems of oversight, documentation, and public accountability. These early interventions established a precedent. The NFL would act to protect its brand, even if enforcement was uneven or reactive. Maintaining the perception of fairness and legitimacy became central to the league's survival. Player misconduct, particularly off-field behavior, has been a persistent challenge. Incidents of violence, substance abuse, and legal trouble generate intense media scrutiny and public debate. Unlike smaller leagues, the NFL's exposure magnifies the impact of individual actions. A single scandal can dominate headlines, influence ratings, and provoke sponsor anxiety. The league has developed multi-layered strategies to manage these crises, including internal investigations, public relations campaigns, and structured discipline. The goal is to preserve the league's reputation while signaling to fans, sponsors, and communities that accountability exists. Reputation management in the NFL extends to health and safety issues. The concussion crisis, revelations about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and disputes over long-term player care represent controversies with existential implications. Investigations, lawsuits, and media coverage threaten both the league's credibility and financial stability. The NFL responded with protocol revisions, research funding, and public statements, aiming to balance transparency, responsibility, and brand protection. These actions reflect a league acutely aware that public perception is inseparable from operational and economic viability. Questionable calls, referee errors, and suspicions of favoritism can inflame fan outrage and media criticism. While such incidents may not threaten legal or financial structures, they challenge the perception of integrity that underpins fan loyalty. The NFL's response has been systematic: review mechanisms, rule clarifications, and targeted communication strategies are deployed to maintain trust and authority. Every decision, statement, and enforcement measure contributes to a narrative that the league is competent, fair, and proactive. Marketing and media strategies play a central role in crisis management. The NFL has leveraged partnerships with networks, advertisers, and social media platforms to shape messaging, highlight positive narratives, and redirect attention. Players, coaches, and executives are often positioned as communicators of league values, emphasizing charity work, leadership, and community engagement. Crisis communication is as critical to the league's operation as the game itself. Labor disputes and strikes have occasionally intersected with scandals, compounding risk. The NFL navigates these situations carefully, balancing transparency with narrative control, ensuring that long-term public perception remains favorable. These strategies have allowed the league to maintain stability despite recurring conflicts that could otherwise erode fan loyalty and credibility. The NFL recognizes that perception often outweighs reality in shaping fan opinion. The league's media-savvy approach reflects an understanding that cultural dominance depends on controlling both story and sentiment. The economic dimension of scandal management cannot be overlooked. Sponsors, advertisers, and media partners are sensitive to reputational risk, and controversies can threaten revenue streams. The NFL's ability to preserve confidence among corporate partners is as critical as maintaining fan loyalty. By responding decisively, framing narratives, and demonstrating institutional responsibility, the league sustains financial stability and investor trust. Crises, in this sense, become opportunities to reinforce authority and demonstrate competence. Cultural impact further complicates reputation management. The NFL is a symbolic institution in American life, representing values such as competition, resilience, and community. Scandals that contradict these narratives risk undermining not only the league's image, but its cultural relevance. As a result, responses are often tailored to reaffirm shared ideals, mitigate dissonance, and restore alignment between perception and aspiration. Public apologies, charitable initiatives, and educational programs serve both moral and strategic functions. The league's approach illustrates a sophisticated understanding of culture as both context and capital. Despite these efforts, controversy is inevitable. Players are human, markets are unpredictable, and social expectations evolve. The NFL has learned that adaptability, transparency, and narrative control are essential. Each scandal is a test of institutional capacity, media strategy, and public tolerance. the management of crises has become a core competency, as essential as coaching, marketing, or revenue strategy. Reflecting on the NFL's history, it becomes clear that the league's ability to survive scandal is part of its broader strategy of power and influence. The management of crises, from player misconduct to health debates, demonstrates a capacity for institutional resilience, narrative control, and cultural adaptability. Scandals are absorbed, lessons are internalized, and structures are refined to mitigate future risk. It demonstrates a league capable of both spectacle and strategy, combining athletic excellence with calculated communication, legal foresight, and cultural literacy. Scandals, crises, and controversies are inevitable in any organization, but the NFL's capacity to endure, adapt, and maintain dominance reveals the depth of planning and control that underpins the spectacle of professional football. I have always believed that the story of the NFL is not confined to stadiums, cities, or even national borders. Its ambition has always been global, a desire to transform American football from a domestic spectacle into a worldwide phenomenon. The blueprint for international expansion is a study in strategic vision, calculated risk, and cultural diplomacy. From the early experiments of NFL Europe to the no-annual international series, the league has methodically explored new markets, tested global appetite, and laid the foundation for the NFL's ambitions beyond the United States. Understanding this trajectory reveals not just the league's commercial ingenuity, but its ability to manufacture spectacle, culture, and loyalty on an international scale. The first serious step toward global expansion came in the 1990s with the creation of the World League of American Football, later rebranded as NFL Europe. This was not simply an attempt to export games. It was a laboratory for rule experimentation, player development, and market testing. Cities like London, Frankfurt, and Amsterdam became sites where the league could evaluate fan engagement, corporate partnerships, and operational logistics. NFL Europe served as both a talent incubator and a cultural testbed, exposing local populations to the rhythms, rules, and narratives of the game. Despite its eventual closure in 2007, NFL Europe laid critical groundwork. The NFL International Series, launched in 2007 with regular season games in London, represents the league's refined strategy. Rather than building new franchises overseas, the league identified key markets with sufficient cultural interest, commercial potential, and media infrastructure to sustain attention. London, with its historical ties to American culture and established sports fandom, became the centerpiece. The league carefully managed logistics, including travel, scheduling, and local partnerships. ensuring that these games felt like authentic extensions of the NFL rather than isolated exhibitions. The International Series exemplifies the principle of high impact. Low-friction globalization delivering spectacle without overextending operational resources. These international games are more than marketing exercises. They are cultural events. The league leverages media coverage, corporate sponsorships, and fan engagement to create narratives that resonate locally while reinforcing the NFL's global brand. International broadcast deals, streaming services, and social media engagement allow fans worldwide to follow games in real time. The NFL has recognized that global audiences consume content differently, tailoring schedules, commentary, and presentation to local preferences. These strategies expand the league's reach while monetizing attention in multiple currencies, reinforcing the NFL's dual identity as both a sport and a global media product. And partnering with local organizations, the NFL seeks to create pipelines of both players and fans. Initiatives like the International Player Pathway Program allow foreign-born athletes to enter the league, demonstrating a commitment to inclusion while enhancing competitive quality. This integration of talent strategy and market development underscores the league. As sophistication, globalization is approached as both a cultural and athletic endeavor, blending spectacle, opportunity, and narrative. Economic considerations drive every aspect of the international blueprint. Sponsorships, ticket sales, merchandise, and broadcasting rights are all calibrated to maximize revenue while minimizing risk. International exposure enhances brand equity, attracts global corporate partners, and creates long-term commercial value. The NFL's approach demonstrates that globalization is not a philanthropic endeavor. It is a calculated extension of the league's business model, one that leverages its domestic dominance to achieve worldwide influence. Every international game, every broadcast, and every sponsorship represents a calculated step toward embedding the NFL into global consciousness. These efforts demonstrate the league's unique ability to translate domestic dominance into international influence, blending culture, commerce, and athletic performance into a cohesive strategy. The NFL's global expansion is more than a business initiative. It is an extension of its identity. It reflects a league that understands the power of spectacle, the importance of narrative, and the value of culture. International games, talent programs, and media strategies illustrate a commitment to growth, influence, and legacy. By exporting football while preserving its American roots, the league has created a blueprint for global prominence that is both strategic and sustainable. The blueprint for international expansion reveals the NFL's vision as an institution that operates on multiple planes. Simultaneously, performance, culture, commerce, and influence. The league's ability to adapt its approach, learn from experimentation, and implement high-impact strategies ensures that its reach extends far beyond domestic borders. The analytics revolution did not replace instinct, it augmented it. Creating a league where performance is measured with unprecedented precision and where teams leverage information to gain competitive advantage. For decades, football strategy was rooted in experience and observation. Coaches relied on film study, personal judgment, and a deep understanding of the game's rhythms. Decisions about play calling, personnel, and risk were often subjective, informed by tradition and reputation rather than empirical analysis. They tracked game statistics more systematically, noting completion rates, yards after contact, and defensive efficiency. Early adopters of data-driven analysis began to identify patterns that were invisible to the naked eye. Metrics could uncover undervalued talent, predict durability, and assess situational performance. Teams that embraced these insights gained a subtle yet meaningful edge in drafting and personnel decisions. The revolution accelerated with the proliferation of computing power and advanced software. Play-by-play data, tracking systems, and video analysis allowed teams to evaluate not only individual performance, but situational effectiveness. Analytics do not eliminate uncertainty, but they reduce it, allowing teams to make more informed investments in talent acquisition and roster construction. Teams now understand that physical outcomes are not solely the result of training intensity, but the product of optimized, individualized strategies informed by empirical evidence. Economics and roster management have also been reshaped by data. Salary cap decisions, contract negotiations, and free agency evaluations increasingly rely on analytics to quantify player value. Teams employ models to project long-term contribution, cost-effectiveness, and market comparables. The integration of analytics into financial strategy has created a league where performance, economics, and opportunity are increasingly intertwined, and where marginal improvements can have significant consequences in both sporting and fiscal terms. The analytics revolution has affected fan engagement and media coverage as well. Networks, commentators, and digital platforms now use data-driven narratives to explain decisions, evaluate performance, and enhance viewer understanding. Fans are introduced to metrics like air yards, completion probability, and efficiency ratings, creating a more sophisticated discourse around the game. Football is no longer understood solely through highlights or storytelling. It is interpreted through data, analysis, and comparison, deepening engagement and altering perception. Despite its benefits, analytics has generated debate. Critics argue that it can overemphasize measurable outcomes, undervalue intangible qualities like leadership, resilience, or situational awareness, and reduce the human drama of the game to numbers. Yet even skeptics acknowledge that analytics has redefined strategy and expectations, embedding data at the core of decision-making in ways that shape both individual careers and the evolution of the sport. The NFL's embrace of analytics also demonstrates its capacity for institutional adaptation. As the league evolved from regional pastime to national spectacle, it continually incorporated new tools, technologies, and methodologies. It is an interplay of measurable probabilities, predictive modeling, and empirical optimization. Every decision, from drafting rookies to calling plays on critical downs, is now informed by data. The integration of analytics has elevated the league's intellectual rigor, enhanced competitive balance, and deepened both fan understanding and engagement. The quarterback, the offensive line, the receiver, and the running back are all subject to these insights. Each snap is scrutinized, each route analyzed, and each defensive alignment measured for efficiency and probability. The human drama of the game remains, but it is now accompanied by a layer of quantification that amplifies understanding, strategy, and outcome prediction. Analytics has not replaced the heart of football. It has illuminated it, revealing patterns, trends, and truths that were previously hidden in instinct and experience. Ultimately, the analytics revolution reflects the NFL's ability to adapt and innovate. It demonstrates a league that understands that excellence is both art and science. That success depends not only on physical talent and coaching intuition, but also on data-driven insight. Teams, players, and fans alike are participants in this new paradigm, where knowledge, preparation, and measurement are as essential as skill, courage, and resilience. The game has evolved, but the stakes remain the same: victory, legacy, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. I have always believed that the NFL is not only played on the field, it is also played in the minds of millions of fans across living rooms, offices, and digital platforms. Over the past 2 decades, the relationship between spectators and the game has evolved profoundly. Fantasy football and legalized sports betting have transformed passive viewership into interactive participation, reshaping the economics, culture, and even strategy of the league. The rise of these phenomena has created new layers of engagement, amplified revenue streams, and redefined the way fans perceive performance, risk, and value. Fantasy football began as a niche hobby in the 1960s and 1970s, but gained mainstream traction in the early 2000s. Initially, leagues were formed among friends, colleagues, and small communities, fueled by newspapers, stat sheets, and telephone updates. The experience was social, analytical, and intensely competitive. Drafts, trades, and weekly lineups allowed fans to engage with the sport on a deeper level, tracking not just their favorite teams, but the performance of players across the entire league. It transformed spectators into quasi-coaches responsible for assembling rosters, interpreting statistics, and making strategic decisions in real time. The digital revolution accelerated this transformation. Online platforms, mobile apps, and live statistical feeds allowed millions of fans to participate simultaneously, tracking performance minute by minute. Games that might have been irrelevant to local fan bases suddenly acquire importance because of fantasy stakes, enhancing ratings and monetization potential. This shift has reshaped the NFL's entire economic landscape, redistributing attention and creating new incentives for performance visibility. Sports betting has added an additional layer of complexity and financial impact. Legalization across multiple states has transformed the activity from underground speculation to regulated, mainstream participation. The integration of fantasy and betting has influenced league strategy as well. Marketing campaigns now highlight player statistics, emphasize matchups, and underscore performance trends. Media coverage focuses increasingly on individual achievement and situational analysis, reflecting the priorities of a fan base engaged with fantasy scoring and betting outcomes. Even game scheduling and broadcasting are subtly influenced by these dynamics, as networks seek to maximize audience participation during critical time slots or high-stakes matchups. The business of the NFL is no longer only about ticket sales and team allegiance. It is intertwined with the behavior, attention, and decision-making of millions of fans navigating secondary layers of engagement. This transformation is not without consequence. The rise of fantasy and betting has reshaped how fans perceive player value. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs are evaluated not only for their impact on team success, but for their statistical contribution to fantasy scoring. Players who are less central to team strategy may gain prominence, while defensive schemes and situational play calling are scrutinized through the lens of statistical output. Fan attention, media narratives, and even coaching strategies are influenced by the secondary market of fantasy and betting, demonstrating the profound feedback loop between perception, performance, and profit. Cultural effects are equally significant. Fantasy leagues and betting pools create social bonds, fostering communities that extend beyond regional fandom. Conversations revolve around individual performance, strategic insight, and predictive acumen rather than merely team allegiance. The NFL has effectively cultivated a participatory culture, where engagement is interactive, analytical, and emotionally invested. Fans are not merely spectators. They are collaborators in a game of measurement, comparison, and narrative construction, reshaping the meaning of fandom in ways that previous generations could scarcely imagine. The scale of this transformation is staggering. Estimates suggest that tens of millions of Americans participate in fantasy football, with billions of dollars wagered legally each year. The NFL has institutionalized these behaviors, integrating official data services, analytics, and cross-promotional campaigns that leverage both fantasy and betting as core elements of its economic strategy. Wins and losses carry personal significance, reflecting strategic competence or misjudgment. Social validation, peer recognition, and financial reward intersect with emotional attachment to teams and players. The league is no longer a passive entertainment product. It is a participatory experience, a platform for social engagement, economic activity, and personal investment. Fans are stakeholders in performance outcomes, strategists, and risk managers, blending traditional loyalty with analytical and financial considerations. This transformation exemplifies the league's ability to innovate, monetize, and deepen cultural influence, extending the spectacle far beyond the field. Ultimately, the explosion of fantasy football and betting illustrates the NFL's skill in turning attention into engagement and engagement into economic power. By integrating statistical insight, financial incentive, and social interaction, the league has created a layered ecosystem in which fan behavior shapes perception, revenue, and even strategy. This evolution reflects a league that understands the value of participation, the power of narrative, and the importance of continuously adapting to cultural and technological shifts. The game remains the game, but the experience of being a fan has transformed irreversibly, producing a league that is not only observed but actively inhabited by millions around the world. the NFL storytelling became inseparable from the sport itself, a powerful partnership between performance and narrative. The 1980s and 1990s brought the first true 24/7 coverage, as cable networks like ESPN created round-the-clock programming devoted to sports news, analysis, and commentary. The NFL quickly became a centerpiece, dominating airtime during the season with pre-game shows, highlight reels, and post-game breakdowns. Fans could consume statistics, video clips, expert analysis at any hour, extending the emotional and intellectual engagement with the league. Games were no longer isolated events. They became part of an ongoing conversation in which fans participated, debated, As the league's prominence grew, so did the influence of narrative framing. Media framing could elevate a player's reputation or scrutinize behavior, often influencing public perception in ways that reverberated through endorsement deals, social commentary, and fan culture. The NFL recognized the value of narrative not just as entertainment, but as a strategic tool to maintain engagement, loyalty, and cultural relevance. The digital era introduced profound changes. Social media platforms, online news, and interactive apps created an environment where fans could access content instantly, share opinions, and participate in conversations with global reach. Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube transformed how moments were consumed, analyzed, and amplified. The NFL had to navigate an environment in which narratives spread faster than official statements, requiring rapid response, strategic framing, and proactive engagement. Media became both amplifier and moderator, reflecting the league's understanding that public perception is continuously shaped, negotiated, and contested. Debate shows, podcasts, and digital media platforms have intensified the ecosystem. Analysts, former players, and journalists dissect games with extraordinary granularity, often framing narratives that shape fan opinion and influence cultural discourse. Topics range from strategy and statistics to personality, leadership, and off-field behavior. The game itself is inseparable from the stories, commentary, and analysis that surround it. But through the orchestration of perception, discourse, and cultural meaning. Ultimately, media narratives and the 24/7 machine illustrate the NFL's mastery over both sport and story. The league has created an environment where performance, interpretation, and engagement coexist in a continuous loop. Fans are no longer mere observers. They are active participants in a cultural phenomenon that extends beyond the field. The 24/7 machine has redefined how football is experienced, discussed, and remembered, embedding the NFL into daily life as both entertainment and cultural narrative. I've always believed that the story of the NFL is not confined to the public spectacle of Sunday games. Beneath the roar of the crowd, beneath the narratives broadcast into living rooms across the country, there exists an intricate, often invisible web of power, politics, and influence inside each franchise. Front office maneuvering, ownership decisions, and legacy battles shape not only the business of football, but the very experience of players, coaches, and fans. Understanding these hidden stories is essential to appreciating how the NFL operates as both an entertainment empire and a high-stakes corporate ecosystem. Franchise ownership has always been a defining feature of the league. From the early days, when teams were locally owned and often financially precarious, to the current era of billion-dollar valuations, ownership exerts profound influence over every aspect of operations. Decisions about hiring coaches, signing players, approving stadium deals, and marketing strategy are ultimately determined at the top. The personalities and priorities of owners shape the culture of each team. Some prioritize winning at all costs, others emphasize profitability or legacy, and still others navigate complex relationships with city governments, fan bases, and the league office. These choices ripple through every facet of franchise life. The front office is where strategy meets execution, and it is often a battlefield of competing interests. General managers, vice presidents of player personnel, and team presidents wield enormous influence. Balancing talent evaluation, salary cap management, and organizational culture. The decisions made behind closed doors are seldom visible to the public, but often dictate the trajectory of a season, the development of players, and even the morale of a locker room. The subtle interplay of ambition, loyalty, and politics shapes the operational machinery of each franchise. A misalignment at this level can derail a team, while strategic cohesion can sustain long-term success. Ownership influence extends to coaching. Head coaches are hired, evaluated, and sometimes dismissed based on their alignment with the owner's vision. Philosophical disagreements, personality clashes, and differing priorities frequently determine the stability of coaching staffs. In some franchises, owners intervene directly in game planning, personnel decisions, or player discipline, demonstrating the extraordinary reach of ownership into what many consider the operational domain of coaches. These interventions are not always public knowledge, yet they can have profound consequences on both performance and perception. Player dynamics are similarly affected by franchise politics. Star athletes, contract negotiations, and media relations are all mediated through front office strategy. Player-agent relationships, endorsements, and public image management intersect with internal power structures, creating layers of complexity in how talent is deployed and represented. Internal conflicts can escalate into public controversies, while alignment between players and management can amplify performance and fan engagement. Behind the scenes, these dynamics shape careers, legacies, and the culture of each organization. The history of the NFL is filled with examples of internal battles that have defined franchises. Rivalries between general managers and coaches, contentious contract negotiations with star players, and succession disputes among ownership families have shaped the league as much as anything that happens on the field. Decisions about whether to rebuild, trade, or pursue championships are often influenced by personal ambition, legacy concerns, and political maneuvering. These hidden stories reveal that football is as much a corporate chess game as it is a physical contest. Legacy battles within franchises are particularly compelling. Some owners see themselves as custodians of history, making decisions that honor past successes while attempting to secure future relevance. Others prioritize immediate success, often taking risks that alter the long-term trajectory of the team. These choices affect not only competitive performance, but also fan loyalty, city relations, and the broader cultural imprint of the franchise. Legacy considerations shape stadium investments, marketing campaigns, and even how team history is celebrated or reframed. Ownership, vision, and ambition thus extend far beyond wins and losses. They influence identity, perception, and memory. The internal politics of franchises also interact with league governance. Owners form alliances, vote on rule changes, and negotiate collective bargaining agreements that impact all teams. Coaches and general managers must navigate these realities, balancing performance expectations with internal alignment. Players experience this indirectly through stability, opportunity, and support, but the consequences are tangible. A franchise's internal cohesion or lack thereof can determine playing time, career trajectory, and public perception. In many cases, success or failure on the field is inseparable from the unseen machinations in offices and boardrooms. Media coverage occasionally exposes these dynamics, but only fragments reach the public. High-profile ownership controversies, coaching firings, or executive departures provide glimpses of the political currents within franchises. Insider reporting and investigative journalism reveal disputes over player contracts, salary cap management, and decision-making transparency. Fans see only the surface trades, free agent signings, Ks, and draft outcomes, but the underlying network of influence is far more intricate, revealing a league operating simultaneously in public spectacle and private governance. Cultural consequences of these hidden stories are profound. The ethos of a franchise, its values, reputation, and internal culture is shaped as much by ownership and front office decisions as by players and coaches. Teams develop identities that extend beyond the field. Franchises are known for stability, innovation, toughness, or controversy, often reflecting internal dynamics. This culture influences recruitment, retention, fan perception, and long-term competitiveness. Understanding the hidden stories behind each franchise illuminates why some teams sustain success while others cycle through instability. Reflecting on the hidden narratives inside franchises, it becomes clear that the NFL operates as a complex ecosystem. Power, influence, and strategy exist not only on the gridiron, but in offices, boardrooms, and private meetings. Ownership, ambition, front office politics, and legacy considerations shape decisions with far-reaching consequences. The spectacle that fans witness every week is the culmination of intricate, often invisible dynamics that dictate who thrives, who struggles, and who ultimately defines the identity of a franchise. Ultimately, the hidden stories inside NFL franchises reveal a league that is simultaneously public and private, performative and political. Behind every touchdown, tackle, and triumph is a network of relationships, ambitions, and decisions that guide the sport's direction. The NFL is not simply a collection of games. It is a collection of organizations, each with its own internal narrative, culture, and strategy. These stories, often untold, illuminate the complexity, sophistication, and enduring intrigue of professional football. I have always believed that every era of the NFL is defined not only by its strategies and rules, but by the players who come to embody its culture. The new generation of superstars has transformed the league, reshaping expectations, influence, and identity. These athletes are not merely performers on the field. They are cultural figures, entrepreneurs, activists, and personalities whose reach extends far beyond the stadium. Their impact is as much about shaping perception and culture as it is about scoring touchdowns or making tackles. Modern superstars arrive in an environment shaped by a century of NFL evolution. They inherit a league built on spectacle, analytics, media saturation, and economic power. Unlike players from previous decades, who were often defined primarily by their performance on Sundays, today's stars operate in a 24/7 cultural arena where social media, endorsements, and branding amplify every action. Their influence is both athletic and cultural, bridging the divide between performance and persona in ways that redefine what it means to be an NFL player. Quarterbacks remain at the center of this transformation, often serving as the face of franchises and, increasingly, of the league itself. Players like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow are not only judged by statistics or victories, but by style, leadership, and their ability to inspire. Their on-field improvisation, athleticism, and decision-making set benchmarks for excellence, while their off-field visibility and voice amplify their cultural significance. Players such as Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, and Micah Parsons have become central to narratives that extend beyond their statistics. Their performances are celebrated, dissected, and shared across digital platforms, often in ways that rival the reach of the teams they play for. Individualism is amplified, yet it operates within a collective system, blending personal achievement with team identity. The new generation of superstars also wields influence in ways earlier players rarely did. Social activism, political engagement, and philanthropic work have become integral to their public personas. Colin Kaepernick's kneeling protest, although controversial, redefined the cultural conversation around athlete activism, demonstrating the power of NFL players to shape societal discourse. Today, many players use their platforms to address inequality, mental health, and community issues, reflecting a generation attuned to both visibility and responsibility. but for its statistical significance, fantasy football value, and media attention. Superstars operate under a microscope where excellence is quantified, celebrated, and debated. The NFL that millions watch today is both a reflection of its century-long evolution, and a precursor to the future. Future being rewritten in real time by data analytics, digital innovation, international outreach, and shifting fan behavior. Understanding these forces is essential to appreciating how the league will navigate the next era, where opportunity and risk are magnified by speed, scale, and global ambition. Technology is perhaps the most visible driver of change. Video technology and replay systems have transformed officiating and accountability. Instant replay, coach challenges, and next-generation officiating tools reduce error and enhance fairness. But they also change the pace and rhythm of the game. Decisions that once relied on split-second human judgment are now subject to review, introducing a new layer of complexity. Players, coaches, and fans must adapt to a system where every action is scrutinized, measured, and, if necessary, corrected, reinforcing the league's commitment to precision and integrity while subtly altering how the game is experienced. The rise of digital media and streaming technology is also reshaping the NFL. Traditional broadcast television is no longer the sole conduit for fans. Fans can choose camera angles, access real-time analytics, and participate in digital conversations, creating a more immersive experience than ever before. The league has embraced these platforms, recognizing that the future of viewership is decentralized, interactive, and integrated into broader digital ecosystems. Engagement is no longer passive. It is participatory, instantaneous, and data-driven. International expansion is another frontier. Teams and the league office are exploring new fan bases, merchandising opportunities, and broadcasting partnerships to cultivate global audiences. International games not only generate revenue, but also serve as cultural exchanges, introducing the sport to new markets while reinforcing the league's identity as a global brand. The NFL is leveraging technology to maximize attendance, enhance safety, and create an environment in which every spectator is simultaneously a participant in the spectacle. Physical infrastructure and digital innovation converge to elevate both the practical and emotional dimensions of live attendance. The NFL's transformation is also evident in fan engagement. I have always believed that the grandeur of the NFL is inseparable from its cost. The league that commands stadiums, television screens, and global attention has been built through triumph and innovation, but also through sacrifice, struggle, and consequences that are rarely acknowledged outside locker rooms, front offices, and the quiet spaces where players wrestle with their own transformations. To understand the full story of how the NFL became the biggest show on earth, one must confront what it gained, what it lost, and what it cannot escape: the human, cultural, and systemic costs beneath the spectacle. On the surface, the achievements are unmistakable. The NFL has created an entertainment empire unparalleled in history. Television rights alone generate billions annually, and the Super Bowl has become a cultural event that defines American identity, commerce, and ritual. Franchises are multi-billion-dollar enterprises. Players are celebrated as national icons. Stadiums rise as cathedrals of spectacle, global outreach, advanced analytics, and 24/7's media coverage have transformed the league into an ecosystem where performance, business, and culture intersect continuously. Every innovation, every expansion, every contract reflects a league that has mastered the art of visibility, influence, and control. Yet behind this brilliance lies a more complex truth. The human cost of building such a spectacle is profound. Players endure relentless physical punishment, often from adolescence through college and into the professional ranks. Concussions, chronic injuries, and long-term neurological damage are real and persistent. The stories are numerous and chilling. Athletes who leave the field with broken bodies and altered minds, their identities and futures reshaped in ways that cannot always be measured by statistics or victories. Every touchdown, sack, and game-winning drive carries with it the echo of personal sacrifice, often invisible to the cheering crowd. Psychological tolls are equally significant. The pressure to perform, to maintain public image, and to navigate a media ecosystem that scrutinizes every action creates stress that can be relentless. Anxiety, depression, and identity crises afflict many players, compounded by the sudden transition into retirement or career-ending injuries. The league has made progress in providing resources, but the psychological impact of decades of high-stakes competition is enduring. Players must negotiate the expectations of coaches, owners, fans, and media while reconciling their own aspirations and vulnerabilities. A balancing act few outsiders fully comprehend. Ownership and front office dynamics also carry hidden costs. Franchise politics, executive maneuvering, and legacy battles often operate in parallel to the public spectacle, shaping who succeeds and who struggles. Decisions made in boardrooms ripple across locker rooms, affecting careers, strategy, and culture. Rivalries between executives, philosophical disagreements with coaches, and ownership ambitions influence everything from player development to media narrative. The league's power is as much exercised behind closed doors as it is displayed on game day, and the stakes, financial, cultural, and personnel are enormous. Economic expansion brings trade-offs as well. While billion-dollar contracts and media deals enrich players, owners, and networks, the league's drive for growth can create tension with communities, labor, and long-term sustainability. Stadium financing, local taxation, and the commercialization of fan experiences illustrate a balance between profit and access, spectacle and equity. Expansion, international games, and digital initiatives extend reach and revenue, but introduce complexity and risk. The NFL has become a machine that thrives on attention, engagement, and branding. Yet these gains are inseparable from the pressures, conflicts, and ethical considerations they generate. Culturally, the league has shaped identity while grappling with controversy. Football reflects American values: competition, resilience, and risk, but also exposes fault lines, inequality, health crises, and the limits of hero worship. Social activism, player protests, and public debates about safety reveal tensions between tradition and transformation. The league has excelled in narrative control, but it cannot escape scrutiny of its choices or the human consequences embedded in its success. Every innovation, policy change, or marketing triumph carries the imprint of history, ethics, and human cost. The NFL's relationship with fame and celebrity is another dimension of consequence. Players are elevated to iconic status, their achievements celebrated and immortalized. Yet celebrity can isolate, distort, and pressure individuals in ways that are difficult to navigate. Media scrutiny, public expectation, and personal branding demand continuous negotiation of identity, performance, and persona. Success is intoxicating, but the glare of attention amplifies failure, injury, and misstep. The league's spectacle is inseparable from this duality, the simultaneous elevation and exposure of those who perform within it. The league's systemic influence also comes with responsibility. Policies on safety, labor, media, and governance reflect decisions with profound implications for players, communities, and culture. Each collective bargaining agreement, concussion protocol, and marketing strategy demonstrates the league's power and the weight of its choices. Progress is often incremental, contested, and imperfect. The NFL is a powerful institution, but it is one that operates within societal constraints, ethical debates, and the complex realities of human performance. Success is measured not only in revenue and viewership, but in the league's capacity to adapt responsibly. Innovation has brought undeniable benefits. Analytics, technology, international expansion, and media engagement enhance performance, fan experience, and cultural relevance. But every gain has trade-offs. Accelerated play, media saturation, and commercial pressures intensify demands on players and franchises alike. Every technological advancement or expansion initiative introduces new responsibilities, new stressors, and new ethical considerations. The NFL's dominance is therefore a story of balance between progress and consequence, spectacle and humanity, power and accountability. Reflecting on these truths, the real cost of building the biggest show on earth becomes clear. The NFL's rise is a testament to strategic brilliance, cultural insight, and human skill. But it is also a story of sacrifice, complexity, and consequence. Players have given bodies and identities. Owners and executives have navigated political and economic minefields, and the league as a whole has negotiated a landscape in which growth, culture, and spectacle coexist with tension and responsibility. This is a story of brilliance and burden, triumph and transformation, visibility and cost. Ultimately, the NFL spectacle is inseparable from its sacrifices. What the league gained: global attention, economic dominance. Cultural influence exists alongside what it lost: unacknowledged suffering, ethical ambiguity, and the enduring consequences of high-stakes performance. The show is bigger than any one individual, but it is built on countless personal stories, choices, and risks. Every touchdown, every championship, every broadcast is both celebration and consequence, part of a system that continues to expand, evolve, and demand more from those who inhabit it. To understand the NFL is to understand both its brilliance and its burdens. The league is a machine of spectacle, culture, and economic power, yet it cannot escape the human realities embedded in its history. The cost is not merely financial or operational. It is personal, psychological, and cultural. The biggest show on earth shines brightly because of these sacrifices, yet its legacy is inseparable from the consequences that underpin its existence. The league will continue to evolve, innovate, and expand, but the echoes of the price paid by players, franchises, and culture will remain as part of its story. As I look back across the century-long evolution of the NFL, I am struck by the magnitude of what it has become, the complexity of what it cost to get here. The league, now a global cultural force, a multi-billion-dollar economic engine, and a defining pillar of American identity, is more than a collection of games, statistics, or highlight reels. It is a living, breathing organism, shaped by innovation, ambition, and competition, but sustained through sacrifice, transformation, and relentless human effort. the rise of the NFL is a story not merely of athleticism or business acumen, but of the tension between spectacle and consequence, between the performance that captivates millions and the lives it irrevocably shapes. The spectacle is undeniable. Sunday after Sunday, fans fill stadiums or gather in living rooms, bars, and digital platforms, united in anticipation, devotion, and emotion. The Super Bowl has become an unofficial national holiday, a cultural ritual that transcends the sport itself. This spectacle is meticulously orchestrated, a culmination of decades of strategy, marketing, rule innovation, and media savvy. Yet beneath this grandeur lies a landscape of complexity and sacrifice that is often invisible to the casual observer. The players who inhabit this world carry physical and psychological burdens that extend far beyond the final whistle. Every collision, sprint, and high-stakes decision contributes to a tapestry of consequences, concussions, chronic injuries, emotional strain, and identity shifts. The stories of men who left the field changed, sometimes permanently, haunt the league even as it celebrates triumph and progress. These sacrifices are woven into the very fabric of the NFL. They are the invisible threads that make the spectacle possible, but also define its human cost. Ownership, front office politics, and franchise dynamics further complicate the narrative. The NFL is as much a league of visionaries and executives as it is a league of athletes. Decisions made in boardrooms, draft selections, coach hirings, stadium financing, and marketing strategies affect outcomes on the field and shape the culture and perception of entire franchises. Rivalries, power struggles, and strategic maneuvering operate behind the scenes, invisible to most fans, but fundamental to the league's evolution. The NFL thrives not only because of what is seen on Sunday, but because of the decisions, ambitions, and foresight exercised in the private corridors of power. The human drama is mirrored off the field as much as on it. Economic power and commercialization have defined much of the league's trajectory, but they also introduce tension. Revenue streams from broadcasting, sponsorships, stadium deals, and global expansion have enabled the NFL to flourish. But they also require constant growth, innovation, and attention to audience behavior. The pressure to maintain relevance, maximize profits, and balance stakeholder interest players, fans, media partners, and cities creates a landscape where choices are often fraught and consequences magnified. Economic triumph is inseparable from operational complexity, ethical considerations, and the management of public perception. The league's story is as much about stewardship and strategy as it is about athletic achievement. Culturally, the NFL is a mirror reflecting American identity, aspirations, and contradictions. Football embodies competition, risk, resilience, and spectacle, yet it also amplifies questions about masculinity, health, labor, and morality. Fans invest emotionally, socially, and financially in a narrative that is at once heroic and brutal, orderly and chaotic. Players, teams, and games become vessels for collective imagination, projecting ideals, fears, and ambitions onto the field. The league's influence extends into music, fashion, politics, and media discourse, shaping perceptions and conversations far beyond sports. America consumes the NFL not merely as entertainment, but as a reflection of itself, its values, and its tensions. The modern era, with its new generation of superstars, technological innovations, and global expansion, illustrates both opportunity and responsibility. Players today are cultural icons, activists, and entrepreneurs, navigating unprecedented media scrutiny and social influence. Analytics, wearable technology, and digital platforms enhance performance and engagement, but also magnify pressure and expectation. International games and digital outreach extend the league's reach. Demanding cultural fluency and strategic planning. The NFL's evolution is a study in adaptability, demonstrating the capacity to integrate tradition with innovation, while negotiating the social, physical, and economic consequences of its decisions. Yet the question that persists is also the most human. What is the cost of this empire? The NFL's achievements are monumental, but they are inseparable from the sacrifices of the individuals who populate the players. Coaches, executives, and communities whose labor, loyalty, and resilience sustain it. Success, fame, and spectacle come with consequences that are tangible, lasting, and profound. These costs are rarely visible in highlight reels or media narratives, yet they are embedded in every collision, contract negotiation, and strategic choice. The league's legacy is intertwined with these human stories, reflecting both brilliance and burden. Reflecting on the NFL in its entirety, I am struck by its duality. It is a machine of entertainment and commerce, yet it is deeply human. It inspires joy, loyalty, and communal identity, yet it exists on a foundation of personal sacrifice, strategic complexity, and relentless pressure. It is at once triumphant and precarious, a cultural beacon and a cautionary tale. Its growth and dominance illustrate ingenuity, vision, and cultural insight, while its costs reveal the ethical, physical, and emotional dimensions that are inseparable from its success. The NFL is a lens through which we can examine ambition, risk, and consequence on both individual and societal scales. Ultimately, the NFL is more than a sport. It is an ecosystem of human effort, strategic ingenuity, cultural resonance, and emotional intensity. Its rise reflects vision, persistence, and adaptation. Its spectacle captivates millions. Its cost reminds us of the stakes at every level. The league embodies the tension between aspiration and consequence, performance and identity, profit and sacrifice. It is a reflection of America itself, contradictions, and resilience. To understand the NFL fully is to appreciate both the brilliance it generates The NFL is, in every sense, the biggest show on earth. But beneath the pageantry, beneath the billion-dollar contracts and roaring crowds, there exists a truth that is at once sobering and awe-inspiring. The spectacle is inseparable from the human effort, ambition, and sacrifice that sustain it. Every victory, every highlight, every moment of collective exhilaration carries the imprint of choices made, bodies tested, and identities transformed. This is the dual reality of professional football, a realm where entertainment and economy, culture and consequence, glory and cost coexist inextricably. In the end, the story of the NFL is not just the story of a league. This is the story of the NFL, its rise, its spectacle, its costs, and its enduring impact on culture, identity, and human experience.